Hello, listeners and fellow book lovers. Welcome to The Book Snug, a bi-weekly conversational podcast about books and the reading life. My name is Julia.
And I'm Stephanie.
And we're a mother and daughter who love reading and talking about books. The ones we adore and the ones we don't. We're delighted you're here, so grab your favorite hot drink or ice-cold beverage and settle in for another cozy, bookish chat.
Hi, Julia.
Hi, Mom.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm very good.
Good.
What do you have in your mug today?
Oh, I'm drinking tea.
That's a big surprise.
This is Puka. It's their Revitalized, and it is my favorite tea ever. It's warm and spicy, and it's great for fall, but I love it all year round. So
Sounds delicious.
Yeah.
What am I drinking? I'm drinking orange spice tea, but I cannot remember the manufacturer. I don't remember who it is, but it's good, and it's perfect for this time of year because this time of year is fall, autumn.
Yes.
Julia's very favorite time of year.
It is.
And my favorite for now.
Yeah.
I am one of these people who loves whatever season is happening at the time. And when that season is winding down, I'm ready for the next one to come along. So I am right there in the loving the fall group of people who just go bananas for it. I'm not quite that crazy, but I do. I'm really enjoying the fall this year.
I mean, I'm even wearing a sweatshirt that says Autumn Enthusiast. So like, if people can't get it then it's not on me anymore.
They're never going to know. Yeah. Listeners, thank you so much for joining us today. If you're new here, welcome. If you've been with us before, we're so happy that you're back. Today, we're just going to have a little chatty discussion about fall reading, seasonal reading, but focusing mostly on the fall and the types of books that we like to read in the autumn time. It is definitely autumn here in South Central Pennsylvania. We live in a place where we have 4 distinct seasons, and the autumn season is the quintessential autumn season. We have leaves that change, the weather turns more chilly, we get more rain usually.
The sunsets are more bronzy, coppery than any other time.
The days are shortening.
Yeah.
We are not currently at peak leaf peeping season yet. Probably in the next week or so that will happen. Close. But it is beautiful around here. We live in a rural area. All the corn is being taken and there are pumpkins everywhere. And it is absolutely lovely. Yeah. I definitely have to say that.
Yeah.
And I am really enjoying it.
Yeah. I do seasonal bucket list as a way to help me get the most out of the seasons. And really that came out of a desire to make the most out of summer, which I have complained about on here.
Right.
But one of the things on my fall bucket list this year is to go to a park right at peak fall and leaves and to watercolor the leaves. And I'm really excited to do that because I think that's just going to be a lovely way to slow down and look at nature and exercise my watercolor skills a little bit.
Yeah. Be mindful of the actual season in the season.
Right.
It has really only been officially autumn for about 2.5 weeks, almost 3 weeks. But I think everybody hopped on the autumn bus as soon as Labor Day weekend was over. So it definitely feels like we are peak autumn right now. We're fully in the pumpkin spice latte, apple cider, chrysanthemums on your porch kind of vibe.
The burnt oranges and browns and all
ochres, golden yellow, absolutely. So we thought it would be fun to take some time and just talk about what fall reading means to us, what it feels like to us, the types of books that we really lean into and want to dig into when the autumn months roll around. Now, Julia is a seasonal book list reader. And if you've listened to our podcast for any length of time, you probably would have picked that up. I am not so much. I'm a seasonal reader in the summer and in the fall more so. But it has more to do with the fact that I just have certain types of books I like to read in the fall, not necessarily that they are fall books.
Sure. Sure.
Before we jump into the book talk, what do you feel are the true fall months for reading? When you think about making up your seasonal book lists, when do you start in on your fall reading officially?
Yeah. So I'm going to go back before I answer that. And
Okay.
so much in that when I do my seasonal lists, it's an attempt for me to romanticize the season. Like it pairs things together. And so some seasons, maybe for spring, I might lean more into fairy tales, or maybe I lean more into romance. It kind of just depends on what vibe of romanticizing I'm going for that season.
Okay.
And this is not something I've always done. It came out of a place of healing from some traumatic things last year, and it's been a very enjoyable way for me to now kind of structure my life and my reading, and plus romanticizing life is just fun and it like heals my inner child, so why not do
Okay.
it? But anyway, for me, I kind of see fall at September, October, and November. That's the fall season, but I see them all uniquely different. So
Okay.
September for me, it's apple picking. It's maybe when I would read the cozy mysteries. It's nothing too serious, but it's still cozy. So I read Fantastic Mr. Fox in September.
Okay.
Or I read The Secret History of Witches that I know that I've recently talked about. Things that are not heavy into Halloween stuff, but they still have kind of a crisp autumn feel to them.
Okay.
In October, then, that's when I want to read the Halloween things. And it's never really scary, but I want things that kind of bring that spook a little bit.
Yeah.
And then November, I don't read dark academia, but I lean more towards like, this is when I would read Jane Eyre, or this is when I would read maybe slightly darker fantasies or things like that still kind of fall within the whole feel of autumn, but are now, it's autumn post Halloween.
Yeah.
So does that kind of make sense in how I'm answering that?
It does.
Okay.
And you know, I was just sitting here listening to you, and I do somewhat the same thing. Although for me, September and October both tend to be my spookier reading time. And then November, I leave that spookiness behind and I really lean into shorter days. Heading into winter, I really like mystery during that time, some literary fiction. And I'm okay to still be reading spooky things as well. I'm just not as prone to pick those types of books up. But definitely dark academia, definitely mysteries. Middle grade, too, that has a very atmospheric tone to it. I like to pick that up. Truly, any atmospheric books that kind of reflect November. So dark, a little bit gloomy, a little bit stormy.
Yeah. So The Historian is a perfect one to read during November.
I agree, 100%.
And I totally just forgot who the author was.
Elizabeth Kostova.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah. But then on the flip side, a book that I read in October last year was For the Wolf by Hannah Winter, because that brought in something. Yes, thank you. Brought in the spooky feel, whereas The Historian is more of that dark academia, wandering through these ruins all over Eastern Europe. So it fit a little bit different, but they kind of do still have that spooky feel to both of them.
Yeah. Another book I think is a perfect November read is Agatha Christie's And Then There Were None, because you have this isolated island, there's a storm going on, people start dying, so there's all this tension and stress and fear. It's a little bit eerie. It's just perfect read for November.
Yeah. Yeah. And now we're talking all about November.
Right.
But it's very interesting how one season can have so many different feelings or vibes or atmospheres about it at the same time.
I just think it's interesting that it's the fall season that it seems like so many people really focus their reading into a certain type of topic or theme or trope or genre. I spend time on BookTube. I follow several BookTubers, and I can tell you that the majority of them just go crazy.
Well, for most of them, the fall is when they make their money because and I'm being heavy-handed with that, but that's when I think when people want to start looking for that cozy atmosphere and other ways to enhance their fall season. So maybe it goes back to that cozy nature of that's what they're searching for instead of the fall things itself.
I don't know. It's crazy because they decorate their bookshelves and they whip out their pumpkin spice lattes and everybody has their cozy sweaters on and they change their fingernail polish to all the wine colors and black and dark brown. It's just...
Well, don't call me out like that, Mom, because I am wearing dark brown nail polish.
You're pretty much brown from head to toe, Julie.
I am. My Birkenstocks included, the whole thing.
So anyway, it's just fun. It's fun to see it and it's fun to talk about it. Mm-hmm. When we talked a little bit about the types of things we want to read in the fall, do you lean more towards fiction or more towards nonfiction in the fall?
I mean, I generally lean more towards fiction, like year round anyway. Uh-huh. And in the fall, I think even more so. I want that atmosphere in the fall, whether that's the falling leaves or the feeling of mystery or dark, rainy, and stormy, whatever it is. I want that atmosphere the most in the fall. And the only nonfiction book that I've read that has done atmosphere well was Devil in the White City. Yeah, and that was a rare book for me to begin with. So I'm not sure that I would read much nonfiction unless they can kind of meet that atmosphere standard.
Right. I would have to say I agree, although I do enjoy nonfiction in the fall, but it has to be vibey. I mean, there has to be parts of it that really feel fallish to me, atmospheric. And that would probably tend to be narrative nonfiction. It's not going to be a self-helpy book. It's probably not going to be a memoir. No. I want somebody to tell me a real story that has that eeriness or that spook factor or just kind of creepy.
Right. Now, I will say there is one nonfiction book at home that I might read in the fall, but that's because in the fall I like mushroom decorations and I have a really pretty illustrated graphic book about mushrooms. Like that might be the only one I sit down and look through. Yeah. Because of the illustrations and because of how it ties in with fall, but that might be the only one that would kind of hit that. Or if one of my photographers that I like comes out with a new book in the fall. But those are unique situations. Mm-hmm.
You've mentioned your seasonal reading lists on the show a couple of times, but we've never really talked specifically about it or in detail. Do you have an autumn reading list this year?
I do.
And what is its vibe? Does it have a vibe?
So kind of like how I was talking about with each of the different months. Overall, I would say this year it's a little bit more spooky and less spoopy.
Okay.
But September started lighter. Now we're getting into more of the ghosty stuff. Yeah. And then November is going to be the darker fairy tale. So it does kind of have an overarching dark, raise the hair on the back of your neck kind of vibe. But I don't do heavy-handed ghost stories. So these are just enough to like make me want to look over my shoulder.
Right.
Or
you don't want to read by yourself.
Right. Not reading at night. No, sir.
You use the word spoopy. Mm-hmm. Do you want to define that for us?
So for me, spoopy is cozy spook.
Yeah. I think that's a good way to describe it.
So it's such a weird one, but like Garlic and the Vampire came to my mind for spoopy because there's a little element of scare to that. But yet it's still really cozy the whole way through. And that's probably a very light example of what spoopy is.
Yeah, I was going to say that's probably on the very far side of the light of spoopy.
Yeah. So spoopy is not Simone St. James, but it might be maybe Agatha Christie.
Yeah, absolutely.
And even then, those might be a little bit heavier examples of that. But it's spoopy, as far as I understand, is cozy spook.
Okay.
And that is definitely not quite my vibe. I'm a little step past that this year.
Do you want to share some of the books that are on your list with us? Mm-hmm.
So I know that I talked about some of the ones that I read in the last chapter.
When we were talking about the quarterly review.
Yeah, some of the ones that I read in September.
Okay.
This year, I kind of wanted to focus a little bit more on rereads, right? Because I'm shopping for my shelf.
Yes.
So I'm shopping from the books that I either have already purchased or already had on my shelf.
Okay.
And I actually just took a picture of this morning for something else, so I'm pulling it up. I have Jane Eyre that I'm set that I want to read in November.
Yes, absolutely. That's the perfect time to read.
And I'm
Jane
due
Eyre.
for a reread of it anyway. I must be craving some kind of innate subconscious comfort because there's a lot of rereads in this list.
I was just thinking Wuthering Heights would be the perfect book to read this time of year too. Yes. I'm not a fan of Wuthering Heights, so I would not be picking it up. But if you are interested in a really dark, atmospheric read with some crazy characters, it's a good book.
It is. And Rebecca would fit well too.
Yeah,
here.
Rebecca.
I also have The 13th Tale
by Diane Setterfield.
Yes, that's also going to happen in November.
Yeah, that's a good book.
I started the Book of Cold Cases by Simone St. James this afternoon.
Okay.
I'm very excited about that one. And then I have Interview with the Vampire by Anne Rice that I'm excited for. And then We Have Always Lived in the Castle by
Shirley Jackson.
You. Totally left my head the moment I opened my mouth.
It's another good one. That's another good spoopy book, but spoopy without the coziness.
Yeah.
It just doesn't get quite to horror. Yeah. And that's how I think of spoopy.
Sure. And then I have, if I can get to it, Jekyll and Hyde on this list as well.
Okay. That's one classic I have not read.
Yeah. I'm very excited about that. And there's a few others on here. I would ideally like to be able to get to Dracula, but I don't think that's going to happen. I even though my schedule is about to open up significantly, I cannot read 13 books in the month of October. And we're already halfway through. Like I have to be realistic or I'm going to burn myself out.
Yeah.
Like I said, there were a couple of books that I am set to reread, but I know that there's a couple questions coming up about how things are going, and I'll just talk about those rereads when we get there.
I said I do make book lists up in the fall. For whatever reason, I just really like to have a pile of possibilities I can go to.
Sure.
And then pick whatever I'm in the mood to read when I'm in the mood to read it. And I did that for this fall. A lot of my books for the fall are a little bit ghosty, a little bit spooky, but I also like to read dark academia in the fall. We just talked about The Secret History at the end of September with Paige, and that probably kicked off my fall reading.
Sure.
I loved it. It's great. And it's the grandmother of dark academia books.
It is.
So it just feels perfect to be reading at the start of fall.
Yeah.
I did pick up another book that's considered dark academia. It's labeled dark academia. I don't know personally if I would call it dark academia, but it did have some of the same types of themes as The Secret History. So I enjoyed that. And I do have a couple other school books on my list. I like reading about ghosts, haunted houses. I like reading about witches, but I don't want to read about witches doing dark magic necessarily.
Sure.
I just like books about witches doing their normal witchy things. Yeah. I love cozy fantasy in the fall. I love to read unsettling fiction that would not necessarily be called horror, but just makes you feel
icky.
No, I don't like to feel icky.
Oh.
It just makes you feel uncertain about what is going on. I like books like that.
I mean, that's a good clarification because I was initially thinking like thrillers. And would you clarify, like, is that what you were thinking or was it?
What is a book? Let me say Neil Gaiman can write books that make you feel unsettled. Okay. Like you just get the feeling that something is off kilter, but you can't quite figure out what.
So like Coraline.
Yeah.
Okay.
But some people think that's scary. That's actually a pretty scary
Well, I read
book.
it in 5th grade. It was terrifying.
Yeah. But even Neverwhere, like there's just like an unsettled feeling to that, even though I wouldn't necessarily call it horror. I don't know.
No, I would agree. It's not, there are some dark parts in some of those books, but it's not he's not writing like Stephen King. Like he's not telling a story like that versus just inserting little things.
Yeah, exactly. So I like unsettling fiction like that. I like just a plain up mystery with an autumn setting. I just read a book that I really enjoyed that had an autumn setting in Scotland.
Of course.
Any book with a good autumn setting. I read one last year called The City Baker's Guide to Country Living, which I shared on the show. That is a great read for the autumn. It takes place in an apple orchard for the most part. And for most of the book, you're in a fall setting from September to, well, it goes past December, but that's the main chunk of the book. And that was good. And then I finally really enjoy classics. Yeah. Especially classic horror or classic gothics, like The Woman in White by Wilkie Collins. That's a great one to read this time of year. I'm currently reading a collection of stories by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle called, I think it's called Gothic Tales. My brain, I can't remember it, but I'm just reading a story every couple of days. Those are also very unsettling stories, but they're not necessarily scary. They're just unsettling.
So like Poe.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. He would be another good one to read this time of year. So those are the types of things I like to read.
Gotcha.
I have been having a very odd reading experience. I feel like that's been my whole reading year.
Yeah.
But in September, I hinted in the show the last time that we traveled. We went to Wales for 10 days in the middle of September.
I'm still upset about it.
And I generally don't read when I travel like that. There's too much other stuff going on.
Right, there's a difference between travel and vacation.
Right, this was not vacation.
Yeah.
I mean, we had plenty of rest time, but we also hiked some hard hikes, did a lot of sightseeing, a lot of driving.
Right,
and
you weren't sitting on the beach with nothing to do.
No, and in the evenings, I just wanted to do other things besides read. So the whole middle of my month, no reading got done. And then I picked up 3 books, and this I don't know if this has ever happened to me before. I picked up 3 books, gave them 3 stars each, but that's not the thing. For each book, there were things that I loved about the book, loved, and then there were things that I absolutely hated.
Oh, interesting.
Like hated. And because of the hating side of it, I wouldn't recommend any of them. But because of the loving side of it, I still gave it 3 stars. I don't think I have ever had that happen before. And it happened three times in a row.
That's
like
bizarre.
3 books in a row.
Oh my word.
I read a Simone St. James book.
Oh, which one?
The Haunting of Maddie Clare.
Oh, that's one of her first ones, isn't it? Yeah.
Of course, the haunting part of it, superb. She can just do that so well.
Yeah.
But there is a weird relationship. It's like an insta-love relationship with a very questionable consent. Oh. And I just did not like that part of the book at all. So if it would have just been a ghost story without this weird love thing going on, I would have been fine.
I've heard mixed reviews about that one anyway.
Then I read We Ride Upon Sticks by Quan Berry. And that is about a hockey team that engages in witchcraft to win their season. They are a losing hockey team. The team hasn't won for years, but the senior girls on this team want to be a winning team their senior year. So they start doing some witchcraft practices because the story's based in Danvers near Salem, Massachusetts. Yeah. So there's some history there about the witch hunts and the witch trials. What I loved about it is based in the 1980s, and I am a 1980s child. I was a teenager in the 1980s. I graduated in 1987. All of the references to that time period were just great. It was a funny book. I just love the interactions of the girls. But it just took this very weird turn at the end of the book. It didn't fit tonally with the rest of the story, and I didn't like it at all. I didn't like it. So that book turned out not to be good for me. I listened to that on audio. And then I just finished a book called The Cloisters, and I cannot remember who wrote that. I'll have it in show notes. That's a dark academia about graduate student who goes to do her internship at the Cloisters, which is this museum in New York City. Loved everything about the Cloisters. Like that whole part of the story, absolutely loved. But the weird relationships that were going on the side, I didn't like. Nobody was likable. It was just the whole time I'm reading it, I'm thinking, why am I reading about these people? I don't like them. There was a weird twist in it made me sad because I just loved so much of the Cloisters part of the story. So 3 books in a row where I really loved part of the book and really hated another part.
Yeah, that stinks.
But those were all choices I made for the fall to read because a little bit witchy, dark academia, haunting. So things are on the swing up for me though, because I'm reading a book now that I'm really enjoying. It's about vampires.
Oh, vampires, Mom.
So anyway, that's my read. I mean, that's what I want to focus in on in the fall.
Yeah. Okay.
How about you? How's your reading going? So even though we make lists and we have a seasonal TBR and we know what we want to read, things don't always go very well, do they?
So I'm a seasonal reader, but I'm impacted by my emotional state. So if I start to get more stressed, I'm less likely to get involved with my seasonal reading. I'm just more likely to pull away anyway. And I'm in the process, like I'm in my last 2 days of my job before I find a new, less stressful job.
You have it. You're just transitioning.
Right. And I'm so excited. But getting to this point has been so stressful that I think that's maybe why there's been so many rereads in my pile, because I knew the story enough that it would almost qualify as a comfort read without being a comfort read.
You didn't want any surprises. You wanted to know what you were getting into.
Right. And there's been a lot. I was rereading a book, The Demon Trapper's Daughter by Jana Oliver, and it's one that I've reread multiple times when I was a teenager. And it really is a fun book. The main character, Riley, is just really easy to get behind. But it deals with demons and trapping demons and some dark undercurrents. And I just was finding that I didn't have the capacity to read some of that. And there's something tragic that happens at the beginning. And I knew that, like, I know that that's part of the story. But I just was having a hard time continuing. And so most of my list is spooky stuff, right? Some ghosty related things. And October, Halloween time is really the only time of year that I'm interested in ghost stories or watching ghost hunting or things like that. I think it's really the only time that I entertain that level of adrenaline. And I was watching some of that in my spare time because it's Halloween and I don't watch horror. I don't watch scary movies.
Right.
I don't watch anything like that. So
you say ghost hunters. Do you mean reality TV where they go into haunted houses and...
So not reality TV, but like creators online who do the exact same thing.
Okay, got it.
And I was finding that was messing with me a little bit. So then I didn't want to read my scary stuff because I didn't want to get back in that dreaming about it or like once Ben goes to work in the morning and the house is dark and I'm by, like I could tell that I was engaging in it too much. So then I didn't want to read Simone St. James, which I know is going to be fabulous, or anything else like that. And then to top it all off, October is when I want to read Harry Potter or watch Harry Potter. And I decided instead of reading it this year, why don't I listen to it as a way, like while I'm washing dishes or if I'm driving to and from wherever, if I'm going for a walk. What a fun way to enjoy that story. And I was looking for a really well done version of the book because there are some really fabulous like ones where you have sounds in the background and things like that. And I don't have an Audible subscription because I don't listen to audiobooks frequently enough to make it worthwhile. But I found the Harry Potter books, and I started listening to the first one, and the narrator does a great job narrating. Like, it's not an issue with how he reads or how he's telling the story, but he's mispronouncing names that I know how they're supposed to be said. And it is driving me bonkers. Literally is driving me nuts. So Voldemort, there is a T at the end of his name. It's in the books. It's in the movies. And this poor dude is saying it Voldemort, and it's stressing me out. And Hagrid, his first name is Rubeus. Mm-hmm. That's how it's said in the movies. And he called him Rubeus Hagrid. And it is... It's not an issue with his narration. Like, that's not the issue. It's these characters that I know who they are.
It keeps taking you out of the story.
It's really messing me up.
Yeah.
And I might have to DNF this audiobook because I can't continue.
Maybe you can find another audiobook version.
Yeah, I'll look on LibriVox or wherever else and see what I can find. But that was a very unexpected stress of a story into my
You're listening to reading. A book to relax, and it's actually bringing more stress to your life.
I about threw the phone across the room the first time I heard him do it.
That's so funny.
Ooh. So I just might end up watching the movie instead. I don't know yet, but yeah.
Are you reading anything else right now?
No, I mean I started Book of Cold Cases.
Okay.
This afternoon, and I have read two of Simone St. James' books before. I've read Broken Girls and Sundown Motel.
Yes.
So I know how she writes. I know that they're easy to get into, and I know the story starts pretty quickly. And so I'm kind of using that to kind of get out of my slump here. And that's about it. I am excited to read We've Always Lived in the Castle because you've talked about it before, and I've seen it now talked about on BookTube.
That's a short one too, and it reads pretty quick.
Yeah.
Because that's another one. It's just unsettling, and you want to know why.
Yeah.
Why are you feeling like things aren't right? That you're missing something important the whole time you're reading it.
Right. So I'm going to use Book of Cold Cases as my jump start back into reading. Then I'll probably read that one next. I'm very excited for Interview with the Vampire because it's not a classic, but it's like a modern classic.
It is absolutely a modern classic. Yeah.
And I don't read stuff about vampires in that way very often. So I think that's probably one of my more excited reads coming up.
It's so funny. I, of course, was a teenager when that book came out originally. And I remember the hype around it then. Then the movie came out with Tom Cruise and
Brad Pitt and Kirsten Dunst.
Kirsten Dunst. Yeah. And how popular that was. And then you didn't hear anything about it for a long time. And I was on BookTube, and there were a couple people who had picked it up recently and were just raving about it. And then all of a sudden, everybody's reading it again.
Well, there's now a new show on HBO.
I did not know that before, but I did. Yeah, I heard that.
And when I watch BookTube, I have my phone pulled up and I add books into my Amazon list. And then that's just the list I give you guys for Christmas, right? And so if I happen to be at the thrift store and I see some of the books on this list, I get them that way. And I had put Interview with the Vampire on my list based off of somebody's suggestion. And I walked into the thrift store and there it was for like $5.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So now I have this book that's brand new, no markings in it or anything. So I'm very excited to read it that way. And shopping like that is just fun because you can get books that you're looking for at a significant discount too.
It's interesting that you bring up Interview with a Vampire because along with my seasonal reading pile of possibilities, which probably has like 30 books in it total.
Sure.
But I don't even anticipate that I will read all of them. I might read 15 of them over the course of 3 months. But I'm not going to read 30.
No. And really what I should do is if I ever run out of books on my shelf is come to your shelf. And because I have probably a fifth of what you have.
And these are all books I own that I want to read. But alongside of that, because I had so much fun doing my little summer reading project where I read classics that have a summer theme, I'm going to do a little reading project focusing on vampires for the fall. And the reason I decided to do that is back in the summer, I think, I bought a book called The God of Endings, and I cannot remember who the author is. It's a literary fiction about a woman who, when she was a little girl, she either almost died or she died. And somebody treated her and brought her back to life or made her well. And part of the treatment was that she was given immortality. But the curse, quote unquote, that came with this immortality is that the longer she's alive on the earth, the more she craves human blood. It doesn't focus so much on that. It focuses more on the immortality aspect and then who she becomes. And that's the part of vampires that fascinates me the most, is that immortality aspect. Because here's a secret about me, or a thing about me. I think that having to live on this earth forever would be awful. Like, that's horrific to me.
Yeah.
To have to be in this body, my body, with my sinful nature, in this sinful world where people treat each other horribly all the time, that I would have to continue on forever. And that state just
what would get
awful.
Me is everybody I love would not
be immortal with me.
That's the other
thing. Everybody that you love and care about would be gone.
Yeah.
Plus, you would have to constantly be moving around because how do you explain to people that you're not growing old?
Right.
So anyway, that is just a personal opinion. I think immortality on this earth in its current state and in my current physical state would just be awful. Yeah. That would be punishment beyond anything I can imagine.
It would be 100%.
So I like investigating that, and you can do that through vampires.
Sure.
And one of the books I'm reading is Interview with the Vampire. So I want to read The God of Endings, which I'm hoping to read in November. That feels like a November book for me because it's not really spooky. It looks at other aspects of vampirism. But I do want to read Interview with the Vampire in October. And I'm currently reading or listening to Vampires of El Norte by Isabel Cañas.
Okay.
This is interesting because it's more of a romance with vampires as a subplot. And the vampires themselves are very interesting, different than what we would associate with traditional vampires. So I'm enjoying it. The writing is a little too much. It's a little too flowery. There's a lot of metaphor.
Yeah, okay.
A lot. And there's also a lot of repetition in the storyline. So that is getting on my nerves a little bit. But overall, I'm enjoying it. Totally different setting, set in Mexico, set during, I would say, mid 1800s to late 1800s. The Mexicans are fighting with Americans. They call them Yankees instead of Yankees.
Yeah.
Over like the border in Texas is what is happening here. And then the vampires are
involved.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So those are my 3 books. I do have a 4th book that I would like to fit in if I'm feeling it. I'm afraid reading too much about vampires could impact my mood. So if I really, really want to read some more, I'm going to read Carmilla by, I think he's a French writer. It's the original vampire book that inspired Dracula.
Oh.
It's about a female vampire.
Okay.
So I might read that. I don't know. We'll see.
Okay.
But that's my like little side project I have going on.
Interesting.
But it's just, I think it's funny that you and I have both picked a book that was originally published in 1992 or the late 1980s. Yeah, that we both picked that to read this fall.
We could almost do our own 3 bees in a pod with it.
We could, yeah. That would be fun.
It would be.
It's probably a very discussable book.
Oh, it probably is.
I have tried to read Anne Rice before. I think I picked up The Witching Hour when I was pretty young, maybe just out of college. It gave me nightmares, and so I had to put it aside. Like when I was reading it, it felt very evil to me. There was one witch, one male. I guess he's not a witch.
A warlock.
A warlock that was just very evil. So I had to put it aside.
Well, with the title like The Witching Hour, there are going to be dark undertones to it.
And I don't think Anne Rice pulls any punches. Like, I think she does horror.
Okay.
So be prepared.
Well, we'll see. I'm not batting too well. Some of that right now, but
neither am I. I am really starting to doubt my ability to choose books. I think I'm picking up books that I like, and then I'm sitting here shaking my head. I don't know what's going on.
Well, I know mine is just coming from burnout in general.
Yeah.
Work has been awful. And so I know once things stabilize here a little bit with this new job that maybe I'll be less burnt out.
Yeah.
But I'm really feeling limited interest in anything, which stinks because this is the perfect time to like sit in a hammock and read or like read good books with a cup of tea and a candle and whatever. And
light a pumpkin cinnamon vanilla candle from Crate and Barrel.
Right.
Drink your favorite tea.
Right. Or to wake up on an October morning with the windows open and curl up with a blanket and read.
Yeah.
And I just am not there.
Right.
So
maybe once you get settled in your new job, things will just cool down a bit and you can focus on reading a little bit more.
Yeah. It might take me maybe a week or so to like detangle everything. But are there any books that you've read in autumns past that you think like are good staple reads? So like I think of Garlic and the Vampire for the fall.
For the fall? Well, I have a middle grade book that I could recommend called The Night Gardener.
Oh, you talked about this.
By Jonathan Auxier. That is good and creepy, but it's not so creepy that it's going to give you nightmares or that you can't read by yourself.
Sure.
But it just has that perfect amount of spook that you get the scare you want without feeling like you're reading full-on horror.
Sure.
That's one book that comes to my mind instantly. Simone St. James.
Yeah.
Another book that is scary called The Winter People by, I think it's Jennifer McMahon.
Okay.
That's scary. That is a scary book, but it's good. And if you are the type of person who prefers your horror to be a little bit more true horror, I would recommend that book.
Okay.
If you're looking for more of a fairy tale that feels like it would be appropriate for the fall, Neil Gaiman has two. One is Stardust. I think that's a really good book to read in the fall.
I would also say spring too.
And spring, yeah. Because it just has that like not goblin market, but there is this market between the fairy world and the real world, and it just has a feel of in between, which is what spring and autumn really are.
Right. And there are some dark themes to it and also some really light themes to it too.
Yeah. And then The Ocean at the End of the Lane is another good one. That's by Neil Gaiman to read in the fall. And then finally The Graveyard Book, which is Neil Gaiman's version of The Jungle Book.
Yes, that's on my TBR list in general.
Yes, but very, very spooky, but it's a middle grade book. So it's definitely doable for adults for the most part.
Do you have that in physical or do you have it?
I have it both in physical form and as an audiobook.
Okay. I'm not going to squeeze it in this year. Next year I will carve space for it because I do want to read it. And I know that you've talked about how good it is. And so I don't want to take it now and then have it until April. So I'll just make a space for next year.
If you like magical realism, I would recommend Sarah Addison Allen's Garden Spells. I don't know if that has a truly fall vibe, but it is about a family of witches.
Okay.
And they have fun powers, like the things that they do are really nice to read about.
Sure.
Sarah Addison Allen, I would say all of her books are good for this time of year because they have magical realism. And a lot of times there is like witchy stuff or supernatural things happening that make it that make them fun.
Gotcha.
I just finished reading a book called Spells for Forgetting. And I cannot remember. Adrienne Young, I think, is the author. And she has a new book coming out now.
Okay.
But this is about a magical island. And the people who live on the island, especially the women, can draw on that magic. And the story has a mystery in it. There's like a dark undercurrent in the community related to the magic. That was a good fall book. The vibes are perfect because it is fall. And the island is in the Puget Sound, which is near Washington State. So there are redwoods, but the trees change color in the book, and there are starlings, and it's stormy, and there's an apple orchard. So
the whole thing.
The whole thing.
Okay.
So those are just some of the books I thought of off the top of my head. I could probably list 100 if I had a little bit of time to sit down and talk about it.
Yeah. Each season is so complex that how do you pick books to read every fall? It's so tricky.
Right, because you said Rebecca earlier in the show, and I would say probably every single Daphne du Maurier book you could pick up in the fall. Wilkie Collins, he's another great one for the fall.
Yeah. And
the Brontes.
Oh my gosh, yes. Yeah.
And that covers a range of genres and topics and themes and tones. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm always so interested how people structure their reading in the fall, because there's so many different ways that you can take it. Like, I know that one of the popular books right now for the fall is the ogre book, something in lattes. Do you know which one I'm talking about?
Legends and Lattes. Yes. I did start reading that book. I put it down only because my library loan ran out and somebody wanted it, so I couldn't renew.
Okay.
I will say just the beginning of the book that I had the experience with would definitely be great fall reading. It's about an ogre who's starting a coffee shop. That's basically what the plot was as far as I got.
Sign me up. So, but you have that, or then you have Simone St. James, or then you have Garlic and the Vampire.
Right,
and,
which is cute.
Yeah. There's so many different avenues that you could take it, or the classics Dracula and Frankenstein and Edgar Allan Poe. There's so it's just, I'm always interested how people approach reading in each season. Like for spring, I love fantasies and romance, but other people you see never Stardust,
right? Yeah,
or and
fantasy. People like to do a lot of fantasy romance,
right? Right. So the fall, it's just interesting the different ways that people kind of look at their reading in that time too.
I just thought of another book that's great reading in the fall, and that is The Hound of the Baskervilles by Arthur Conan Doyle. That is great. That is a great book for the fall.
I haven't read that one, but the Sherlock show. Yeah. But I know that they have an episode like that. And very good. Very good. Well, I feel like we could keep talking and talking and talking and talking about fall books and
the books I want to read, the books I have read. Yeah.
Or the new releases.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Earlier, I mentioned Spells for Forgetting by Adrienne Young. Her new book is called The Unmaking of June Farrow, and it is about a woman whose mother disappears.
Oh.
And she finds this door and realizes she can walk through it, and she ends up in another place.
Oh.
And that's what this book is about, her being in that other place and looking for her mother. So it's another magical realism type of book. And it just sounds like it would be an excellent read for the fall. Adrienne Young is the author of Fable, which is a young adult series. Do you remember? If I showed you the picture
I probably would.
Namesake.
So I've never read that, but
do you remember the cover?
I recognize the name.
Okay.
So if it was popular when I was in high school, it probably had a different cover.
Okay. But she's been writing adult books, and they tend to have a very strong magical realism undertone. So, I haven't read her new book, but it is out, or it's going to be out very soon. Well, is there anything as we kind of close up? Is there anything specifically, reading or otherwise, that you're really looking forward to this fall? I'm looking forward to my vampire project. and just being able to pick books out of my pile of possibilities. They're all books I really want to read. It won't be a hardship. I'm just in a little bit of a place where I'm not really trusting my decisions because I've had some weird reading experiences. But I'm just looking forward to reading. Loving the weather. I want it to get cooler. I want to be able to snuggle up in a blanket and smell the fresh air and drink lots of London fogs and hot chocolate and
hot
tea.
cider. And,
Burn lots of candles.
Yeah. Jealous. But you said you're going out to the cabin too soon, and that'll be very lovely with the pretty colors and everything. Yeah. I think you're going to have a ton of fun writing all these books in the show notes.
This will be quite a list, I think.
Yeah. And I didn't name all of mine, but I'll make sure that the list gets up on Instagram in case anybody's interested.
You could post some pictures of your books. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I have a crime scene one, Antebellum South, that I'm excited about. And there's one or two others on there. So yeah, I'll include that in there as well. Next episode, we're going to continue with our fall theming and talk about our favorite ghost stories.
Yes, I can't wait. I have several to talk about. Not the ones I'm bringing to the show are not like very scary ghost stories, but they are ghosty.
Oh, the two that I'm thinking of off the top of my head are pretty heavy-handed.
Okay.
So to bring this entire vague conversation back together.
I guess we do need to do that, don't we?
Right. At some point, maybe. It sounds like we have actually oddly similar lists this year.
I know. That is interesting. That's very interesting. I wonder if YouTube is impacting us in the same way.
You know what? I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
I think it'll make for a very interesting review at the end of the year too.
Yes.
To talk about, especially Interview with a Vampire.
Yeah.
Depending on however we choose to do that.
Well, and maybe when the new year rolls around, or after we get past our 1 year anniversary, we can just sit down and talk about it.
Yeah, maybe.
If we both like it, or if we both hate it, we could do that.
We might as well just pencil it in anyway.
Yeah, right. Maybe one of us will love it and the other will hate it, which
or
seems
one of
more
us will
normal.
DNF,
right? Well, then we won't have anything to talk about.
Or why we DNF'd it.
Yeah.
So it could be a whole fun thing. Next episode, continuing with the fall theme, we are talking about our ghost stories, some of our favorite ones.
Yes, I can't wait to talk about this. I have some good books.
Yeah, there could be some actually really spooky ones on there. That's coming up. And then you did mention our year celebration.
Our 1 year anniversary is coming up, believe it or not.
I know.
I can't. I'm shocked.
I know.
We've had so much fun.
We have. To start something literally on a whim in the middle of a conversation and to just run with it has been so fun. So we're starting brainstorming for that here pretty soon.
Yes. We love that you listeners have been joining us on the journey. It just makes us so happy. We're tickled pink.
We are. And I don't really want to talk about the stats too much, but to see people around the world listening in has been just so much fun. And we are brainstorming a way to find a more centralized location for us to communicate and interact with each other.
And have conversations. We're hoping to have a little website started where we can post all of our podcasts and you can leave comments if you want to without having to be a member of Instagram or Facebook.
Yeah. So hopefully we'll have all of those details at our big hoopla celebration.
Our big woohoo party.
Yeah. Thank you again for listening and for joining us today here in the Book Snug. And we hope that you join us in the next chapter.
Bye, friends. We'd love for you to continue today's conversation with us at the BookSnug_podcast on Instagram and at the BookSnug podcast on Facebook. All of our episodes can be found wherever you listen to podcasts, as well as at our website, thebooksnugpodcast.budsprout.com, where show notes for every episode can be found. We'd love to hear from you. Email us at thebooksnugpodcast@gmail.com.
As C.S. Lewis, one of our favorite authors, so famously said, "You can never have a cup of tea large enough or a book long enough to suit me," and we wholeheartedly agree.